Thanks everyone for coming out. We really appreciate it. We're really excited to walk through this data observability journey with Comcast and Monte Carlo and Databricks together. But before we jump into that, I did just want to give a brief introduction of both Robinson and myself. I'll start things off. My name is Scott Lerner. I'm a customer success manager here at Monte Carlo, and I've had the pleasure of working with the Effectv team for the last year since they've been a customer and got to experience all of the great work that they've done with data observability and Monte Carlo specifically. A little bit about myself is I'm a Bay Area native, born and raised here. I'm a huge Giants, 49ers, and Warriors fan. And fun fact about myself is that before I found my passion in data and analytics, I was actually a registered EMT. I thought I was going to be a firefighter, and then I took a different career path, clearly, and ended up here today. So I will note that I am no longer certified, so if there's any emergencies, please go to professionals, not myself.
Hi, everybody. I am Robinson Creighton. Same thing goes for me. I'm not emergency trained in anything. But from all the way up here, I'm very good at knowing where the emergency exits are at all times. So I have us covered there. There's one. There's one back there. Fun fact about myself, I am from the good old Midwest, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where my first job ever was actually in professional sports. I was a racing sausage mascot for the Milwaukee Brewers MLB team. All right, yeah, go Milwaukee Brewers. Obviously, that was before I found my passion for data. I am now a senior manager on the data ops team that really began the engagement with Monte Carlo and ultimately led its implementation at Effectv across many teams. So Scott and I were both so excited to be here today and just share some of our outcomes and accomplishments of our two teams working closely together these past 6 months.
Yeah, and we're excited to dive into that, but before we do, I know not everyone in the room may be familiar with Monte Carlo and Effectv, so we're just going to lay the foreground, give you a little bit of background before we jump into the specifics of the deployment at Effectv and some use cases that they've rolled out in the last year. So first, I'm going to ask a little bit of crowd participation. I know it's late in the day, but I want to get the energy in here a little bit up. Can anyone here in the room raise your hand if you've ever been on the receiving end of a broken report or a dashboard? Yes, I'm impressed that some of you have your hands down. How about receiving an odd hours ping from a stakeholder or an executive saying that they have an outage or that there's a broken report? Yeah, those are never fun to get. And last but not least, for the data engineers in the room, have you ever been presented with a broken pipeline with really no direction as to where to go and investigate and find out the root cause of how to resolve it? Awesome. Well, if you raise your hand, I think that was the majority of the crowd, you'd experience data downtime. Data downtime is what we refer to as really any time that data is missing, erroneous, or otherwise available, and is really at the root cause of what Monte Carlo was built on, is to prevent data downtime. So when our co-founders realized that there was this issue across the globe with data teams that are experiencing data downtime, what they did is they wanted to solve for this issue of provide data observability and solve for this issue of data downtime. How they went about and did that is starting with 150 different data teams, interviewing them, so folks like yourself here in the room, to understand what are the common questions that they receive on a day-to-day basis. We quickly realized that there was a common theme of questions that they saw across the world and across all of these 150 different organizations. So questions like, is my data up to date? Is the data complete? Are the fields within the expected ranges? I'm sure these are all questions that you're familiar with as people who work in data. These questions are really the foundation of what we refer to as the data observability pillars, and what Monte Carlo as a product is built to observe, and really the core fundamental of our product value proposition. So things like freshness. So the first data observability pillar is knowing if your data is up to date. You know, are tables updated within the expected time frame in which they normally are? And when they're not, are you aware of that happening? Volume. Are those tables being updated with the actual row count or byte size that they would expect them to? And when you see large deviations from that, so large injections of rows that you didn't expect or a large deletion, is your team aware, or do you find out by a broken dashboard or erroneous data? Next is quality. So are fields within their expected ranges? So checking for very specific metrics at the field level is something that we do so that you can understand when a null percentage spikes up or a %0 is particularly high for a specific field that you care about. Schema changes, pretty straightforward. Anytime that schema is changed, deleted, or otherwise changed, you're making sure that you're aware of it. And last but certainly not least is lineage. So being able to parse lineage without manual intervention is one of the core fundamentals of Monte Carlo as a product. So you can quickly understand upstream and downstream of a particular table, even down to the BI layer. So knowing what tables feed into a particular Looker report or a Tableau workbook. Now, all of these tools and the Monte Carlo data observability pillars are really feeding into what Monte Carlo's product is attempting to do for data organizations like yourself, which is detect data issues when they occur, so using both our machine learning incident detection and also custom rules that you actually implement yourself, and knowing when those things do happen. Resolve, providing you with tools so that you can quickly do some RCA effort and come to a resolution, all in an effort in hopes to be preventative. So rather than getting that late night ping from a stakeholder saying, hey, why is this data broken, or why does this data look wrong, your data team knows when those data issues are occurring and actually come to a resolution before the end consumer actually gets exposed to these data issues. So I know that was a lot, but that's the foreground of what Monte Carlo is, and I'll pass it over to Rob to give the background on Effectv.
I am curious, I want to keep the hand raising going here. Hopefully we've heard of Comcast, but who here has heard of Effectv? Clearly my team is in the front row. My wonderful supportive team, my customer success manager. So we are a division of Comcast, specifically the advertising division. And if I was to give you our 5-minute elevator pitch, it would be this. We are all about audience delivery, meaning we will reach the right audience with the right message at the right time. So let's say you have a car company and they're coming out with a new eco-friendly vehicle, and their research tells them that this car is going to be great with the single female in her 30s who's environmentally cautious. So using our data, we will not only reach that audience with that message, but we will reach them when we know that they're in market for a vehicle. And our superpower, we like to say, is we do this across a fragmented ecosystem. I'm sure we're all aware just how dramatically the video landscape has changed really within the past decade or so. We went from consuming television on a single big screen in the family room, it had to be at a certain time of the day, to now being able to stream our favorite shows and our favorite movies with a click of a button. And this wheel here on the right really paints that complexity of the modern ecosystem today. So if we were to work our way out from the viewer's perspective, that first ring is just the content. So the variety of content we have accessible to us, from all of the networks to now all of these apps that are creating shows for us and their own movies and own TV shows. The second ring is the distribution. So the distributors of that content, from your MVPDs like Comcast to the actual subscription video on demand services, or maybe it's free ad-supported streaming television, so think of Xumo and Google TV. And then the last ring is the where. So where we can access all of this content, from our smart TVs to our connected TVs to our phones, tablets, gaming consoles. I mean, the list just goes on, really. We are consuming media in more ways than ever before. And in fact, our latest TV viewership report, which we come out with twice a year, said that the average adult spends almost 6 hours of their day consuming some form of video content. That's a lot of time. And that leads us to processing roughly around 5 billion transactions where a consumer saw an advertisement. And outside of that complexity, Comcast also just has a wide presence. We're in roughly around 30 million homes in the US, and that's across more than 60 markets, 11,000 TV programs, and around 170 networks. In total, we have a reach of around 96 million adults, and that's both Comcast subscribers and non-Comcast subscribers. And we also don't just stop at our data. We partner with numerous leaders in the industry to understand our audiences, define when we've reached them, identify when we've reached them, and also when there's been an impact to them. And I'll talk more about what that means in the future. So you're probably wondering, how do we do this? How do we handle data at such an insane scale? And the first component is having organization around our data. So we have a domain-driven design approach where our leaders across the organization tried to identify what were those main groupings of data that enabled our business. And what they landed on was 7 domains. So the first being customer. So when we say customer, those are effective customers. So the actual advertisers coming to us with their business, with their ad campaigns. And they could be past customers, they could also be potential customers we want to work with in the future. That's not to be confused with the next one, which is audience, which is who the customer, who the advertiser is trying to reach. So the audience are those viewers, those consumers of video content where ads will be shown to them. Supply, this is more operational in nature. It's all around understanding our inventory and the content we have available to show ads on, and how we can best price it and package it and sell it so that we have the most yield for our business. Measurement and attribution, these two go hand in hand with one another, but there's a subtle yet significant difference. So measurement is just pure proof of performance. You know, did we Effectv do what we said we would? Did we reach that audience? How many times did we reach them? When did we reach them? On what device were they watching? What show were they streaming? There's numerous ways we can show measurement, whereas attribution is more of that impact piece. So was the audience persuaded to tune into a show they otherwise wouldn't have watched? Did they navigate to the advertiser's website and click around on their homepage? Or best case scenario, did they end up purchasing an eco-friendly vehicle and having a positive impact to our customers' business? So if you're curious about these 2 domains and you want to learn more, we actually have a session, Comcast on Thursday, where 2 of my colleagues will go into our journey from measurement to attribution and actually using Databricks to do it. So stay tuned till the end and we'll provide out that information. I did want to take this stage opportunity to plug that. Finally, last 2, finance and people. Again, more internal focused. Finance, how are we doing financially? Are we tracking towards the KPIs we've set as a business? And people, our talent, understanding our talent, and constantly working to improve the employee experience. So having data segmentation is great to organize ourselves as a data team, and also in Databricks, we've organized our Unity catalog this way. And we've also enabled specific accountability and responsibility for that data. So every domain has your subject matter experts, your data stewards, your different stakeholders, and it also has different data quality rules applied. So using the Monte Carlo feature of domains, we can organize our data and onboard users into the platform and just have them see the domain that they care about. So the exact same assets you see in the measurement schema will be the exact same assets you see in the Monte Carlo UI. So having data segmentation is one thing, but when you pair it with an innovative cloud-based tech stack, it just amplifies the power of your data and your ability to use it. So if you just look at this high-level image, I mean, note how many places you see the Databricks icon, right? It's the reason we're all here today. Effectv has been in the platform for a little over a year now, and we are trying to use as many of the advanced features as possible. Delta Live tables, Photon Accelerator, anything that they come out with, we like to try. We're still streaming in data from various places, whether it's using a Lambda function, a direct S3 bucket, Kinesis stream, you name it. But using the Unity catalog, we're classifying and standardizing our assets into those 3 medallion tiers we all know and love, right? That bronze layer being your first initial untouched raw data before you start to augment it and filter it for optimization in your silver tier. And lastly, your gold level, your data governance certified high-level business aggregations to enable the business. And we also have a session tomorrow that will go into our data governance model on Databricks, so stay tuned for that. So what's next, right? The downstream use cases, we have a few of them. from our internal systems, right, that need data for their applications to work, your reporting needs and analytics needs, whether it's to external facing clients or maybe it's internal reports in whatever BI tool of choice. And then we also have a component where we share data with some of our advertisers and agencies for their granular needs when it comes to attribution. So with all of this, from ingestion, transformation, data sharing, having data observability and having data quality becomes critical in this production environment. And that is where Monte Carlo comes into play.
Yeah, thanks, Robs. And if it wasn't clear already, data is very important to the Comcast Effectv organization, I'm sure just like folks here in the room. And so after seeing all of the vast amounts of sources and all of the different tools that they're using, I'm going to walk through a little bit about how Monte Carlo is actually integrated into that picture and some of the great work that Robs and her team have done with Monte Carlo thus far. So, just like any other vendor that you're going to work with, all relationships start with an integration. So I just wanted to quickly highlight Monte Carlo's integration process, which starts and ends with security and data privacy top of mind. And we really pride ourselves in the ease of implementation. From start, it's really just a process of two different steps. Is deploying our data collector, which is basically just our source of being able to maintain and track metrics associated with your data so that we can understand those anomalous behaviors. So collecting things like your metadata and your query logs so that we can make the correlation analysis, and then making sure that we have our sources set up. So obviously Databricks, making sure that our Monte Carlo service account has access to that meta layer of data. And then really we're off running. From there, in the next few days, we start training our model to your table specifically, and then we're able to start detecting incidents just within days. So Comcast Effectv, and just like any of our other customers, we have data privacy first, and we have an emphasis on speed to value, because being a data observability tool, we want to make sure that we're detecting issues as soon as possible. Now, diving into some of the specific use cases that Robinson and her team came to Monte Carlo with a year ago when they were evaluating and chose Monte Carlo as the data observability tool. The first one that was a high priority was being able to provide a single pane of glass across different teams and regardless of tech stack. And so that was a key priority early and often and still remains a top priority for the Effectv team. And to visually represent that here, I pulled a screenshot of our data reliability dashboard. So our data reliability dashboard is available for all of our customers. It's basically an insight view into everything that we're monitoring from a Monte Carlo perspective at a holistic level. So regardless of tech stack, regardless of what team you land on, we provide you with high-level metrics, and so that you can understand your data organization across those data silos and break them down. So as you can see here, we're on the far right-hand side, or your left-hand side, the tech stack and all of the different tables that we're currently monitoring. And then we make KPIs that are important to our customers available. So things like data uptime for specific tables and specific monitors that we actually have, to the number of incidents that we've seen in the last week or 6 weeks or 6 months, depending on how you filter things out, so that you can get a true understanding of how data reliability is operating in your organization. Some other cool things that we like to provide that aren't here on the screen are things like status update and time to resolution when data issues do happen, which historically have been a pretty hard thing for teams to measure over time. And so if you start to understand sort of what it takes to respond to incidents and resolve them, you can start to track those things and report them up into your organization. So we really have done, I think, a good job of providing that single pane of glass across teams and across data stacks with the Effectv team. So that was at a high level. So what an actual individual user may use in a more granular look is a look into the table level access that we have and the availability of being able to quickly get up to speed on whichever assets you care most about. So whether you be a seasoned data engineer with tons of context of your data, or you're brand new to the organization and you need to get up to speed on certain tables that your team's going to be responsible for, you can leverage our asset manager, which it's a screenshot here, to go to whichever tables you care about and quickly get up to speed on things like, hey, what's the freshness of this table? What's the volume, and what's the expected range of which we expect another load to happen, or the scale in which we expect the records to come in at for that particular table. There's a ton of other cool, really cool features associated with our asset page for new users of the organization, or just veterans as well, is things like table owners, or understanding all of the queries that have happened on this table for the last 7 days. So being able to provide that value just out of the box is really, really important for organizations like Comcast Effectv. Some other cool things that we do too is like field level lineage, so you can understand where a field's being used and downstream or upstream of the table that you're currently on. Now all of that is kind of our automated features when it comes to, almost like cataloging and understanding from a high level sort of what Monte Carlo is monitoring within your organization's tech stack. I wanted to highlight some of the great work that Rob's and her team have done from a custom monitors creation perspective. So I talked at the forefront of the presentation about some of our out-of-the-box monitoring that we do. So the things like freshness, volume, schema changes, which are great for wide coverage. But much like many of our customers, Comcast Effectv quickly learned that they have some key internal metrics that they only have the business context to know the thresholds in which they need to be alerted when something deviates from the norm. So you can see an example of this is a custom SQL rule that they've actually deployed. So you can see they've actually injected a custom SQL statement. They set the threshold in which we use as a barometer for when it breaches. Then Rob's and her team are notified that, hey, there's been a breach of this rule that they had set up. But also, really importantly too, I'll highlight over here on the right-hand side, is the SQL rule notes. So Rob's and her team have put in a ton of work to provide notes and contextual knowledge to the on-call resource that would be responding to an incident that occurs. So when they receive a Microsoft Teams notification saying, hey, this rule breach that you set up, they are not in the blind as to what exactly this rule is. They actually provided the context here in the notes saying, this rule is checking for X, and here are the next steps as to how to troubleshoot and come up with a resolution for the issue that occurred. So the more documentation, the better, and the effort that Rob's and her team have put in definitely pay off and is really impressive. And last but certainly not least, I wanted to highlight our Lineage capabilities and some of the value that that's provided to the Comcast Effectv team. So as you can see here, I grabbed a screenshot of our out-of-the-box Lineage that we provide for each one of our assets or our tables that we're monitoring within Monte Carlo. It's a great resource to quickly understand dependencies both upstream and downstream, even down, as you can see here, to the looker level or whichever BI tool that you're using, so that you can understand the correlation between tables all the way down to the business intelligence level. This is really helpful, again, for getting up to speed, but also for helping with triaging of incidents. So when an incident does occur, or when you have an issue of data downtime, being able to quickly understand the potential impact of that incident is really important for on-call resources and triaging and knowing whether or not they need to stop whatever they're working on to go and resolve this broken pipeline. And the best way that we do that, and we've seen the Effectv team use this heavily, is the impact radius. So for every incident that occurs, we provide an impact radius, which is just a snapshot into the potential impact of whatever incident that we detected. So you can quickly understand how many tables were potentially impacted, the level of users or number of users that are actually impacted, and how many queries have actually been run on this table in the last 7 days. Taking it a layer deeper, we actually do provide BI layer metrics as well for the impact radius, so that you can quickly understand how many users in your organization are actually going to be impacted. So for this incident in particular, there was over 900 reports that were potentially impacted by this data incident. And that's probably something that the data engineer is going to say, I need to go and fix this first, so that before their consumers report it back into the organization or say, hey, what's wrong with this report, they can actually go and troubleshoot and make that incident right and make a seamless experience for the end consumer. So All of that being said, just like any other tool and being able to provide cool features like Monte Carlo does, it's only as good as the operational process and the actual actions that we drive. And so I really want to commend the Effectv team and all of the work that they've done with the operational side and the process of receiving incidents and what to do with Monte Carlo notifications. And so I will pass it back over to Robs to highlight the operational side of things.
Thanks, Scott. So I said that we were a domain, organized organization. So we've kept that same flow for our notifications themselves. It's how we've organized our data, how we've onboarded users and provided access, and same thing goes for the notifications. So we have a self-subscribe model where instead of us having to manage forever changing stakeholder lists and email addresses in the platform, though that's certainly an option, our users just self-subscribe to the sub-channel of their choice. We're a Teams, Microsoft Teams shop at Effectv. It doesn't matter if you're in sales to engineering to a member of the ELT, you have the icon on your desk. So that was just our tool of choice to have a centralized location where we can reach all of those business users if need be. With our notifications, we tried to take a lot of that guesswork or those initial questions you have when you first get an incident, which is, does this pertain to me? How important is it? Should I be concerned? Who's responsible for fixing it? So every incident is predefined with a severity, and that comes through in the Teams channel in clear red and orange coloring to indicate not only to our users if it's a Sev 1 or Sev 2, but also the level of effort or attention that our on-calls teams need to give to the alerts for remediating. As Scott mentioned, we have those SQL notes filled out. We've had investigation rows returned in the incidences, so that becomes your starting point of when an incident happens. Our on-call teams can immediately go into troubleshoot, as well as providing table owner tags and steps like that. Some other areas we've utilized of the platform, just to avoid what we call alert fatigue overall, is using the importance levers. So there's two areas in Monte Carlo. One, the importance score, and that's a number assigned by the platform on a scale of 0 to 1 as it assesses all of your data and all of the users' number of reads and writes to the table, and you get this score. So we no longer have to start from ground zero of, is this important or not? We don't have to listen to that loudest stakeholder yelling on the phone to you at off hours. You can use data to determine if the data is important. But you're probably wondering, well, what if I don't agree with this score from Monte Carlo? For instance, you could have a data set, maybe it's updated quarterly, and it's a financial report, and there's one user. But that one user is the CFO, right? Monte Carlo doesn't know that that one user is the CFO. So we can use the key asset toggle to manually change this to be a key asset. And we use these two simultaneously. They go very well together. Next, muting. As Scott mentioned, we've integrated Monte Carlo across many teams, many integrations, Redshift, Unity Catalog, many AWS accounts. So we have a lot of data engineers and we have a lot of data analysts who are doing ad hoc work, POCs, and they're creating data sets and deprecating them, and it just doesn't make sense to have full-scale monitoring enabled. So either you can mute the asset entirely, or you can mute the specific monitor level. So maybe you're working on a data set, and it's still being updated every single day, but you're working out the kinks of what that final schema should be. You're adding and removing columns, and for that use case, it maybe doesn't make sense to keep the schema change incidences occurring, but you want to have freshness and volume rules happening. Last but not least, of course, we all know how important tagging is, specifically in the cloud when we want to track our costs. But for Monte Carlo, it's more around just organization and being able for your users to come quickly into that asset manager page, using those searching capabilities and get down specifically to what they need. So everything we've spoken up till now has been pretty high level, how Monte Carlo came to be, how we've integrated with them. But I think there's no better way to show what Monte Carlo brings to the table than with a specific win at our at our organization. So before I do that, you're going to go through a little advertising lesson, some ad lingo 101. So we're in the measurement domain, excuse me. So orient yourselves there. There's something we call an impression. And an impression, in simple terms, is just eyeballs to the ad. So how many times was the ad seen by that target audience? And this metric is so important for us, especially for our digital product, Effectv Streaming, because it's our currency. We bill off of this number. So an advertiser can come to us and says, I want 1,000 impressions. And we say, okay, here's that cost for those 1,000 impressions, the CPM. And they sign on the dotted line, we have contracted revenue in the books. And we don't deliver that 1,000. Maybe we only get to 800 eyeballs. That means we cannot bill the client in full. We lose that contracted revenue. Or we have to go through what we call a make good process, which is us making good on our promise to get to that 1,000 impressions. And that's at no additional cost to the advertiser. But it comes at an operational cost to us. Of course, it's always best to hit the goal the first time around than having to go through the make good process. So we have a pacing report. It's a heavily, heavily used report in our company that our ops teams and sales teams can go in and see how their campaign is looking and pacing towards that impression goal mid-campaign. It's actually with Databricks that we can do this. We're bringing in a lot of impression sources together, marrying it with the order data so we can understand what was booked by the client versus what we delivered, and create those pacing calculations. Just to give you an idea of scale here, for a single day of our digital product, we have thousands of active campaigns running. And collectively, those thousands of campaigns, they have impression goals of in the millions. So we need to deliver on billions of impressions, excuse me, I said millions. Billions of impressions, but if we reach, or if we acquire billions of impressions, our revenue for us will be in the millions. And if we don't, if the ad servers go down tomorrow, hopefully they don't, we are looking at an impacted consumer base in the thousands. So that's from the actual sales teams, ops, to the advertisers. So this is just a critical report for us. And where Monte Carlo comes in is providing, again, that out-of-the-box alerting where we don't even have to touch a finger. So I'm going to just go through those pillars of what it means in this use case. So the first, freshness, right? Making sure that every single day, first thing in the morning, the data is available for our ops teams to come in and make sure that they have the most recent impressions from the day previously and know if they're in the red or the green. If they're in the red, they're probably spending the rest of the day trying to get back to the green. But if we don't have that data in the morning for them, we will get a lot of calls. Second, volume. This is around more, do we have all the active orders? Do we have those thousands of campaigns, or does suddenly it drop to 100 the next day? Monte Carlo will be able to flag us that anomaly. Distribution, though, is more around the actual impressions themselves. So let's say you have a campaign that's consistently pacing at 100 impressions per day, and then suddenly it drops to 0, or maybe 20. Monte Carlo will be able to give us that distribution at the field level and give us that insight. Schema, this is more important for those upstream impression sources that we're marrying together, making sure no schema changes impact this aggregation. We also use schema just as an additional layer of awareness for our stakeholders to know when we've created new columns for their use. And lastly, lineage. If you remember that impact radius Scott showed, we love it for this one because it's essentially everyone at the company. But the lineage components will also tell us what are the dashboard derivatives out there. We're aware of the main dashboard, the main report people are using, but of course users can be creating their own tiles, their own dashboards off of the data. So having those lineage dashboards and tiles can give us additional layer there. So that was just one big use case at our company. But as you can see here, the overall response from leaders in our organization, it's been overwhelmingly positive. Our analytics teams, our data analysts have gotten back hours in their day, in their week, by not having to answer those questions manually anymore of Who owns this data? How did this data come to be? What's backing this dashboard? Monte Carlo gives them those answers in seconds. And our ops teams who are using that pacing report, they feel empowered to make quick decisions so that they can optimize those campaigns mid-flight.
Yeah, and this really speaks to all of the work that the Effectv team has done, and it's really impressive to see hours being returned to their team, and also just improving things like trust and reliability, which we love this positive feedback, but just like any relationship, it's not over yet. I wanted to highlight some of the things that we have marked up for the next 6 to 12 months for our partnership to help improve and keep scaling Monte Carlo at Comcast Effectv. So I'm going to briefly talk through the things to come and the things that we have mapped. First, one big goal of Monte Carlo is really meeting our users where they work. And so one thing that we've highlighted that we really want to work on and be a priority for the team is as they get more and more integrated into ServiceNow, making sure that we can support providing that context that Monte Carlo can via incidents and all of the other great features that we have into ServiceNow. More technically, one of the great things that the team is looking at leveraging is circuit breakers. So actually using Monte Carlo SQL rules, the output of those, and when a breach happens, to actually run a circuit breaker and either run a DAG or cancel a DAG in Airflow, and just really get more advanced with the more flexible parts of Monte Carlo as a product and really implement some of those more advanced capabilities. In that same vein, as the Effectv team has gotten more and more advanced, much like many of our other customers, we want to start to take a lot of our processing and scaling outside of the UI. And so one area of focus is monitors as code. And for those less familiar, it's really just taking that monitor creation process and scaling it, not just by creating monitors in the UI, but rather in a YAML file so that you could quickly deploy these monitors and really do it at scale, and even inject it into your CI/CD process rather than folks going and making one-off monitors, really being more operational with this. And last but not least, always leveraging the API more. So as data engineers, you're familiar with wanting to be outside of the UI as much as possible. So we make pretty much everything accessible via our API. So leveraging the API more frequently is definitely on the roadmap and in the future for the Effectv team. Well, we really appreciate you all sticking with us and listening to our presentation today. But while I did have all of your ears, I did want to highlight 2 other sessions that the Comcast Effectv team are going to be putting on this week. So tomorrow there's going to be a session on enabling data governance at Databricks. And then on Thursday, there's going to be an additional session around ad measurement and attribution, some of the topics that Rob's had outlined earlier and some of the key things that the Effectv data teams are working on. So wanted to highlight that here and plug for the great people that are going to be presenting there.